Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our session exploring who will be the winners in travel retail in the future. My name is Sophie Griffiths. I'm editor of TTG, that's Travel Trade Gazette, the world's oldest travel trade title and proud media partner of WTM London. And I'm really thrilled today to be here discussing this key topic because we all know the pressures that the last 18 months has placed on this sector. But we also know how resilient the travel industry is. So as the dust begins to clear from the COVID crisis and customers return to booking travel in significant numbers, we're going to be exploring this afternoon what the impact has been on travel retail, from online travel agencies to home workers to new tech players, and of course, the good old-fashioned high street travel agent. So before we begin, and I welcome up our panelists, I just want to give a bit of context to today's topic. We all know about the coronavirus crisis and its impact on the sectors, and not least, of course, travel. But prior to this, it's really significant to note that the travel industry had also been rocked by a number of other events which had started to lead to a real resurgence in consumers turning to travel agents. So in 2016, we had the collapse of low-cost holidays. A year later, the industry witnessed the largest UK airline to ever cease trading with immediate effect, leaving 110,000 passengers overseas. I'm talking, of course, about Monarch. But this was then surpassed by Thomas Cook, which went into liquidation in 2019 after 178 years in business with an estimated 150,000 holidaymakers abroad. Now, all of these events matter because we were starting to see anecdotally how they had given consumers pause for thought, with many turning to travel agents because they wanted to have somebody to turn to if something went wrong while they were on holiday. Over and over again, agents were telling TTG that they were winning new customers who wanted that peace of mind when they were booking their dream holidays. Now, cut to a few months later, we all know what happened next. The world shut down, and travel, like many sectors, was of course put on pause as the coronavirus crisis tightened its grip on the world. But as the world begins to reopen, it's been really interesting to note this resurgence in agents that we were seeing pre-pandemic has been strengthened even further, and crucially within different demographics as well. And while we had anecdotal evidence pre-pandemic that agents were surging in popularity, as we emerge, or at least we learn to live with the pandemic, we're now having the data that backs up this anecdotal evidence. So in March 2021, ABTA, that's the Association of British Travel Agents, released new research highlighting that consumers are nearly a third more likely to use an agent and to book a package holiday now than before the pandemic. The main reasons they were giving was that they wanted to book with an agent because it made them feel protected and reassured. Now, just this week, we've also seen research from WTM London itself highlighting how more and more young people are turning to travel agents owing to the challenges posed by the pandemic. So those aged 18 to 44 are upwards of 20% more likely to book with an agent than they were pre-pandemic, and this was from a poll of 1,000 UK consumers. So this is all really, really positive news for the industry, but are these people actually booking holidays? Well, the answer, thankfully and fantastically, is a big yes. So some of you may know that TTG has been running something called the TTG Travel Agent Tracker since April 2020, back at the start of the pandemic. Now, every fortnight we ask our readers for their sales, their inquiries, their bookings, just to get a sense of the overall travel picture and trends that they're seeing. And we ask a mixture of high street travel agents, home workers, online or call center agents, as well as business agents. Now, our latest one is being collated literally as we speak, but the most recent data from our tracker, dated the 2nd of October to the 15th, saw volume of both inquiries and bookings was continuing to accelerate for agents. So we had 94% of agents receiving inquiries, while 85% were receiving actual bookings. So it's all looking fantastically positive. People are clearly inquiring, and most importantly, they are booking. But who will be the big winners in travel retail? So here to discuss this very point, I am thrilled this afternoon to be joined by Jim Eastwood, Global Sales Director at Travel Counsellors, Julie Pinkney, Retail Director at the Travel Network Group, and James South, Founder and CEO at iGo Room and Gecko Digital. Can I invite them all to join me on the stage, please? Now, before we begin, I just want to say, if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask, please do raise your hand at any point, and I will invite you to join in the discussion. We very much want this to be a collaborative effort, so if you do have questions, please do put them towards our panelists. Now, just to begin, I'm going to ask each of you just to explain a little bit about yourself and the business that you represent, very, very briefly. Jim, I'll start with you, then Julie, and then James.
Thanks, Sophie. Hey, everyone. My name is Jim Eastwood. I'm the Global Sales Director at Travel Counsellors. We have 2,000 flexible working travel agents who sell leisure or business travel around the world. About 1,500 of those are in the UK, and they provide handheld, concierge, trusted travel. They operate as franchise owners, and we are the master franchise and founded 27 years ago, and with about 350 support staff around those 7 global locations. Maybe the one thing to mention is that working flexibly and working remotely in the pandemic, when everyone's rush was to stay at home, was fortunately what we already did. So that's maybe one point to note.
Yeah, and have you seen a real increase in people wanting to come and work for you because we've seen this sort of rise in home working?
Listen, there's a good and a maybe not so good point in that. The good is, yes, there's been a strong rise for people wanting to take control of their own destiny, to work flexibly, to not face the uncertainty of employment that we have seen over the last 2 years. But then the not so good aspect of that is that there's been a fallout from travel.
Yeah.
And some people with great travel businesses fell by the wayside during this very difficult period. Fortunately, there's businesses like ours and Julie's and others who can give them a home, because travel is in the blood, and it seems to be a passion that people don't want to let go of too easily.
Yeah. Julie, I saw you nodding to that point. You know, you've seen the crisis really at the coalface. Talk to us about the Travel Network Group.
So hi everybody, I'm Julie Pinkney, I'm Retail Director for the Travel Network Group. I manage our 18 travel agency stores around the UK. That's a combination of stores that we own ourselves, as well as stores that we are managing on behalf of our members, which was an opportunity that came through the pandemic to go into a new way of working with some of our members who were struggling through the pandemic and the situation and the impact it was having on the shops.
And you've seen, you know, to Jim's point, that the kind of the real crisis taking its hold on members and the huge, immense challenges that they've had to face, and some businesses that have had to close, sadly. Just talk to us about some of the challenges that your members have seen over the last 18 months.
I mean, I can talk to the challenges that we've seen as our retail branches, but obviously we've had customers who have been very angry at the situation. We've had customers that have been absolutely desperate, people that were stuck out in their destinations and couldn't get home, people that wanted to go and see their family. So we've had to deal with cancellations and amendments of bookings, as well as people who are in very emotional state, financial challenges that they've had where they would need to get refunds on their holidays. So our staff have really been at the coalface of all of those customer challenges, and just trying to make sure that they're not losing all the bookings that they've spent the last 12 months securing. And you know, they've worked so hard to get those bookings in the first place. They've worked even harder to protect those bookings and try to keep them, and encourage those customers that, you know, you don't have to cancel, you can move it to next year. And we've facilitated that for them. So at a time where we've had to reduce the amount of staff and the hours that we're employing staff for obvious reasons, we've been busier than ever. You know, it's just been absolutely...
It's the story of travel, isn't it? It's the last 18 months.
Yeah, it has been.
And James, you've got a very different business. Talk to us about yours.
So my name's James South. I'm the founder and CEO of Gecko Digital and iGoRoom. So Gecko Digital was a content company, or is a content company, that does VR and immersive marketing for hotels and tourism boards, and leverages off countries where tourism makes the biggest outsized contributions to GDP to create an immersive map of that country from the sky, in the room, and under the water. In 2020, we got thrown off a cliff with COVID, and we had to repivot and understand how we could look at ways that we could onboard hotels whilst also empowering them with the kind of content that was helping them up until then. And in a world where if you can't bring people to the property, immersive marketing allows you to take the property to the people. It was the birth of iGoRoom. So iGoRoom was the world's first online travel agent that exclusively uses that virtual reality and immersive marketing to sell hotel rooms, giving people a better understanding of where they're going to stay before they arrive, especially in a time where space is the new luxury and people want to feel like they're socially distant. VR, virtual reality, really panders to that kind of space that it exhibits.
So when you say the kind of first virtual travel agent, is there somebody still sort of there that people can talk to, that consumers talk to or speak to on the phone? Or?
Yes, we've mapped the customer service journey. So we have a CX support center that we're in the throes of setting up at the moment, and we're also leveraging off new technologies, AI, to implement AI chatbots. so that you could actually get through to the person you need to speak to a lot quicker if we can field it with more targeted questions and FAQs.
Okay, so we've heard how James was able to pivot as a result of the pandemic. Jim, talk to us about how travel counsellors, everyone's saying this word pivot, aren't they? But how did you respond to the crisis? How did you support your 2,000 travel counsellors? Because you said at least 500 of them are not in the UK, they're around the world. How did you keep everybody connected and supported during this time?
It's the most important thing is, and it's cliche, but it's important that you start with it in mind, is your people. Because if your people are okay, they can navigate what Julie described, which was the massive frustration that customers were experiencing. So our people are self-employed, flexible workers, franchise owners, and they don't have income unless they sell travel. And they don't have income unless those trips get satisfied and they return safely as well. And this was all thrown into disarray. So their income was thrown into disarray. So what we did was adopted, as corporate as it sounds, we adopted quite a comprehensive and a 5-point strategy for our people, the travel counsellors. It's centred around finance, community, wellness, engagement, and training. And if I was to pick one of those 5 outside of finance, I would pick community. And galvanising a community together that was already strong and had a strong culture of togetherness and connectedness, even though remote, was strangely galvanised by the pandemic. We had travel counsellors that came to, originally in mid-March 2020, if we recall, came to our respective support centres dotted around the world and basically knocked the door and said, how can we help? And they wanted to take on the roles that the head office support teams were doing.
Wow.
So the sense of community and peer-to-peer support carried us through. And maybe, as I said, the cliche part is, if your people are okay in all those different aspects, then you can inform, protect, and reassure your customers and clients.
Wow, okay. And Julie, same question to you. How did you support your, those 80 shops that were really struggling? And when we talked about the challenges, how did you support them? Was it through product development or any kind of innovation, or was it just being there for them?
So I think, as James said, the support for the staff and the wellness of the staff was really critical, because when they're suddenly thrown into this environment that they're currently faced with, they need that support more than they've ever done. And I think as an organisation, we've been amazing at how we've supported our teams. Yeah. So every week throughout the pandemic, we've held a team call that everybody has joined, whether they're in the shops, whether they're in head office, whether they're working from home, no matter where they were. And that's been consistent right the way throughout the pandemic, just keeping people informed, keeping them updated, sharing good news stories, as well as some of the challenges. And then also with each of the shops, because they've suddenly gone from being in a shop environment where they're sitting with their teammates, they're now going and working from home. So they're becoming like home workers, if you like. They're sitting at home on their own, dealing with all of these challenges. So again, on a regular basis, we pull that team together and have a Zoom call with them. And it's, it's not talking business, it's talking, how are you feeling? How are you managing? What are the challenges? How can we support you? Yeah. And I think that has been the thing that has got us through the last 2 years.
Piece.
The wellness piece, exactly, looking after the staff. Because if we look after them, we know that they're looking after our customers.
Yeah. James, what about your team? Were you already working remotely, or did you have an office? How did you manage that? And how did you also come up with this idea of iGo rooms during the pandemic? Because that's a very swift pivot that you've managed to implement and bring to fruition.
I think that's a kind of story in itself. We're one of these rare businesses, if I can think of any, that have actually set up in the pandemic on Zoom. So we are protagonists for the virtual getting togetherness. It's been a labour of love. So I've managed to surround myself with incredibly talented people, and I think going back to what Julia was saying is this whole idea of informing your end customer. I feel there is no better rhetoric for that than what virtual reality provides, because it is the most informative content in an age where content is king.
And how did you manage to do that with your team, though, spread over Zoom? Was it someone's idea? Was it something that you were already going to be working towards?
Yeah, it was a vision that I'd kind of had 7 years ago.
Okay.
And I wanted to use UI and UX to completely revolutionize the way that people book rooms, again, in an age where content is king. And I wanted to use that to also empower the hotels with this technology so that it reinforced their direct lines. But there was no one doing it indirectly. And I remember we engaged a management consultant, and they said, the barrier of entry of getting someone else to go and do this is huge, because not only do they have to fly to the resorts, mobilize photographers, get seaplanes to hotels on islands in the Maldives, but they also have to get that approved from the hotel and mandated by corporate. So the fact that you've already got this content and you own the IP and the usage rights to this content means that if anyone's going to do it, it has to be you. So it was forced upon me 2 years ago, and it was the pandemic that gave me the time and breadth to say, look, I can build a team of consummate professionals around me. Instead of furloughing a lot of my DevOps and our developers that we had for Gecko Digital, we pivoted and switched them into developing the booking engine for what has become iGo Room.
And the way that you're talking about, really is the sort of future. You see, this is the future of booking holidays.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a little bit biased on this, but I genuinely believe that we level it to, if you think of an age where black and white was replaced by color, that you've got the top 4 companies really putting billions of dollars. I mean, Facebook most recently with the metaverse into virtual reality and AR technologies. Google, obviously, with its Street View campaign that's been running 15 years. We are just the next stop to that, but in hospitality, because when you generate all these analytics by publishing this content to direct channels, you see 2 things. You see that the bounce rates are going down and the average sticky rate on the website is going up. So the obvious question was, well, why is no one doing this indirect? And I think the fact that we have amassed this library of VR assets meant, again, going back to the management consultant, it had to be us. And we went for investment, and we raised and broke all records very quickly, raising the biggest amount of money in the quickest time for crowdfunding in Asia. So we knew there was an appetite for this from investors, and I think that was indicative of an appetite for the consumer side in a world where we are moving more virtual.
Of course, it doesn't have to be in place of the travel agent, though. The two can complement each other very well, and we're seeing lots of high street travel agents and perhaps home workers using VR technology.
100%.
Yeah.
We work closely with DMCs and tour operators on the ground here in the UK, where they run virtual fan trips, and they use our content in, again, the climate that we've been in the last 2 years to give people a better understanding of how they exist.
Julie,
before they've arrived.
What are your thoughts? Do you have members that are using, or retail shops that are using the virtual headsets, virtual reality headsets? Do you see them as the future of selling holidays?
I'm sure they are in the future, absolutely, of course, and I think they must be, because if we want to engage with our customers and the customers of the future, we've got to be engaging with them in the way that they want to be engaged with. At the moment, I would say that we're not quite there yet, but we are obviously embracing the technology, and one of the things that we've done over the last couple of years is worked a lot with business partners who will help us to operate virtual events for our customers.
Okay.
So we've actually had customers join these Zoom calls where they've been on safari in destination, and it helps the customer to really understand exactly what they're going to see when they get there. And so I think it's a short step to what
that came about as a result of the pandemic, doing these sort of virtual Zoom calls.
Yeah.
Okay.
And really engaging with customers in that way. I think it was separated before, but as you say, you need to sort of bring it together, and whatever type of travel agent the customer wants, they're going to want different tools to be able to make their decisions about what they book. So some of them will be happy with a video. Somebody else might want to get really far more immersed than just a video in what they're looking to do.
And those that are using tools like the Zoom Safari that you mentioned as an example, are they going to continue using that? Because there's a lot of suggestions that people are feeling a little bit zoomed out, right, after the pandemic. Are clients still demanding that?
I don't know necessarily that the customers are demanding it, but we're offering it as a service, and we will continue to offer it. But I think it has to be a blend, because people also want to see you in person. Yeah. So you can hold those events either virtually or in person, and then the customer can choose what they want to do. I think there's a lot of value in doing the virtual events, because people will make the effort to join those that won't necessarily invest the time to come out and go and spend a few hours travelling somewhere in order to be there in person. So there's a blend.
Jane, what are your thoughts on this? Because again, a bit more difficult for a home worker to perhaps be able to use a VR headset with their customer. But how do you sort of see virtual reality working with the future of home workers? Do you see it as part of the future in selling travel?
I'm thinking about travel, and the customer journey, as James alluded to. You think about inspiration. I think it's got a great role to play in inspiration, and you think about being in destination, and you think about the the return from travel as well, and all aspects throughout that journey require different things. And I think you have to be, what's the phrase they're using, omni-channel, and not limited to just one area. You have to appeal to what the customer and clients need and what they're saying that they want. As corny as this sounds, we operate in a feelings-based business, and I would go as far as to say in a feelings-based industry.
Yeah.
So whatever excites the feelings that the customer or client needs is where you should place your focus and your energy. We used to be coffees in a cafe, and now we're zooming around the world. But yesterday, we have 1,500 UK TCs, as I mentioned, and the majority of them are attending 10 events across November, and the first was yesterday in Edinburgh. And I attended it, and see, being face-to-face with, you could argue, our customer, who is our travel counsellors, those franchise owners, and them now being able to be face-to-face with their customers, that is the single most powerful way to elicit the strongest feelings that you can attach with travel, bar none, and I would argue that. However, if you complement that with things like VR, if you complement that with things like Zoom, and if you complement that with things like expertise and personal experience, you've got this rich omni-channel approach.
And what about the virtual reality fam trips that James was talking about? Do you see that as the future, as a great way for agents to educate themselves without perhaps even leaving their living room?
And I think it's fantastic. You think about Tent with a View in Tanzania, or you think about some of the fantastic DMCs in South Africa and Asia and other parts of the world, bringing that product into someone's home. Our travel counsellors increasingly do video sales. I don't know if any of you have got your car fixed at a good mechanic recently, but it's often that they'll send you a video message and say, here's what I found wrong with your car, here's the things I'm going to fix, here's the parts you're going to need, here's how much it's going to cost, and I'm Bob, and I'll be your person that you can speak to. The power of being able to see things, and where you can't be face-to-face, is massive. So, yeah, we take every opportunity to leverage that, and fortunately, as James mentioned, our DMCs are embracing that. From the leisure side and the tour operation that we run as well, the DMCs have all this rich content, and they want to bring it to life. And if that's via FaceTime there and then, or via AI and VR, as things progress, then we welcome all those changes.
And as we were discussing earlier, it then plays into the sustainability point as well, in that it doesn't mean that you have to jet off and see different places necessarily.
That's right. Well, it was comforting to hear the plane overhead for hopefully all of us involved in travel, even though it interrupted our sound for a moment there. But, people, the pent-up demand to travel again is palpable. I don't know about you, but I felt frustrated for 2 years of your bucket list was getting longer. I know we had bigger problems to face in both travel and society, but not being able to travel, being grounded, give us all an opportunity to change the way we worked, as Julie and James have spoke about, but it has given us even more desire to want to see the world. And hopefully that's been reflected in the last 3 months and the opening back up of travel.
Yeah, and we are going to come on to the sort of trends that you're all seeing. I just want to make sure to see if we've got any questions at all. If anybody's got any comments that they'd like to make or questions, perhaps your thoughts on virtual reality, whether you see that as the future for travel retail at all, please do raise your hand. Not sure if we have any. No? Okay, if you have one at any point, do raise your hand later on. James, I was going to come to Jim's point about, he was saying that you want to be able to have that face-to-face connection with someone. Obviously, it doesn't sound like your business model allows for that, but do you think that there is very much a space for people to not necessarily to need that? They just want the ease of being able to log on, see a destination and book it there and then?
Yeah, it reminds me of a comment we had on our social media a month ago, where we were launching a competition and someone came in and said, I would never let virtual reality, I'd never put on a virtual reality headset and that would replace my holiday. And I think it was kind of a poignant point that we're not trying to replace holidays.
Right.
We are replacing the booking part of that holiday. Because I think there's a lot of stress. It's actually connotated to once you arrive, you've got to get on the plane. If you're going to Atlantis and Dubai, you've got to queue up the water slide. You've got 2 kids in tow. The actuality of attending that holiday is a lot less dreamy than the booking process behind the holidays. So it's, that's really where we come in. It's the whole prelude, the lead time to getting that hotel and putting the dream back into that booking process. In terms of, what Jim was talking about, we are reinforcing our customer service journey by also trying to revolutionize the way that people speak to people. because we know in an age where Zoom has taught us that we have to be virtual and face-to-face meetings can only be done through a laptop currently or previously, we are looking at incorporating this idea of virtual fam trips into a customer service journey as well. So you could have a Zoom callback and you can walk people through on a B2C level and upsell on different room categories in virtual reality, which is completely distinguished from how we've done it before. And
so have the travel agent walking the customer through?
Yeah, so you would have an agent walking them through and selling them the knowledge whilst putting them immersively in that hotel.
And have you seen a rise in sales since you've been able to kind of offer this type of technology, or is it too new to tell yet?
It's too new. We haven't launched yet.
Right, okay.
Soft
Far
launch.
too new.
Yeah, hard launch coming later.
I wanted to ask, we touched on the trends. I mean, Jim, you were sort of saying, your bucket list was getting longer and longer. We're hearing lots of comments from people in the travel industry about the types of holidays that people are booking now, that they are those more bucket list type destinations. They're spending more on their holidays. They're looking for longer breaks. A lot of consumers, presumably those not working in travel, have managed to save up a lot of money over the last 18 months, and they do have more disposable income. I'd like to come to each of you about the types of trends that you're seeing and the types of holidays that you think people are going for, and if they've changed as a result of the pandemic. Jim, I'll start with you, Julie, and then James.
You hear so many things at the moment. I overheard a conversation just before coming on stage about revenge travel. People with their gripe or grudge against the pandemic saying, well, I'm going to travel again because I wasn't allowed to. And they're calling that revenge travel. I think instant travel is a major trend. Can I go now? Can I go safely? Can I go quickly? And I can get back before anything changes? That was born out of all the unpredictability that has happened. Sustainability is a massive agenda. It's happening at COP26 at the moment. And I think the focus on responsible travel and eco-travel needs to be shared across the entire industry. Airlines seem to be taking a lot of the heat, but there's many other aspects to the entire travel journey. Privacy and seclusion is a massive trend. That's what does drive your average booking value in the most part, I feel. Average booking value has increased by 20 to 40% in leisure travel from pre and post-pandemic in our business. And it's not because the component parts are more expensive, it's because people are, you think about it, they're going for the private transfer, they're going for extra legroom, they're going for the villa rather than staying in resort. And this isn't everyone, but more people because of privacy, seclusion, and safety.
Right.
Now, will safety still be prioritized over price as we continue to progress and things become back to more like normal? That's yet to be seen, but the bigger themes like sustainability will persist and will only bring good and positive change to the industry, I feel.
And on the issue of sustainability, are you seeing that coming from customers? Are customers starting to ask more questions? Are they becoming more kind of socially conscious, aware of their holidays? Or is it being driven more by travel counsellors who are saying to their customers, these are the types of things you can do on holiday because it's front of their mind?
And so we capture the voice of our travel counsellors and the voice of customers and clients from a business perspective, and it is a theme that sits across all and in different ways. Travel counsellors want to be informed and educated, and we're accrediting our travel counsellors through the Travel Foundation on all things sustainability. Customers want to make sure that you've got product, and our product in our own technology that we've developed called Phoenix is green leaf marked, so you can see what product is sustainable product or meets that criteria. And then clients, from a business perspective, I travel with business today, and our agenda, you want to know about carbon offsetting, you want to know about that reporting, and you want to make sure that your ECG and CSR, and sorry about the acronyms, but all your reporting that you have to do from a due diligence and corporate perspective are satisfied. Maybe one trend I didn't mention, and it's deviating slightly from sustainability, but it would be too obvious not to mention, is duty of care. And so sustainability fits into the area of duty of care, but providing people with end-to-end safe travel, whether that be sustainability or privacy and seclusion, I feel it's captured in the wider topic of duty of care.
But that comes back to people returning to travel agents specifically for that, because they want somebody to be, look after them and protect them, doesn't it?
Listen, we talk about having, and Julie will have this too, and many other companies who you can use, but we talk about having personalised, handheld, tailor-made support from inspiration to destination and when you get back. And the reason why I say that is that's what customers seem to crave and demand now. Customers could, and actually still can, book travel themselves, but the fear and the complexity and the perception that sits around the complexity means that, yeah, our numbers and percentage of new customers are increasing month on month on month.
Wow.
And it's twofold, I feel. One, for what I just mentioned, craving trusted travel advice. And two, because maybe James would find this interesting, is our travel counsellors, for example, took much more to social media, took much more to Instagram, and took much more to the places where people were on their smartphones and tablets whilst locked down. And even though the conversation starts on social media and everybody was on social and maybe we're wary of it, the conversation may start there, but the cognizance among consumers of, oh, I can get trusted travel advice, I don't have to do this myself. Not everyone knew that it existed, especially amongst younger demographics.
Younger demographic, yeah, which I think is where, plays back to that WTM London survey, doesn't it? Showing that more and more are actually turning back to travel agents. Julie, what sort of trends are you seeing? And on the sustainability piece, are you seeing customers starting to ask questions around that, or is it more being led by the travel agents themselves?
I think it's probably being led more by the travel agents themselves at the moment. I mean, I think that we see a lot of our customers are the older demographic. We are seeing customers returning to us that we've maybe used to book in the past and have been booking directly themselves for the last few years. So they're starting to come back to us. And we're also seeing brand new customers that have not booked with us before who have booked directly in the past. And what we're seeing is them coming back to us because last year, we know that there was a lot of chopping and changing of the traffic light lists. They were confused as to what they could do, what they couldn't do. What if I book and then it changes? What if I book and then I get ill? And they just find that so complex to navigate. So what they're doing is they're coming back into the trusted travel expert who they know is dealing with that day in and day out. They know where to get that information.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, every single customer's got their own individual criteria as to, where are they going? Have they been vaccinated? Do they have children? Have they been vaccinated? What are the rules for the country they're going into? And to just try and make sure that you're getting that information correct, that they almost want that reassurance that somebody who knows what they're talking about is helping them with that. So that's the first thing that we're seeing. The second thing that we've been seeing throughout the pandemic is an increase in higher end holidays.
Right.
So longer haul travel, booking villas for the social distancing side of things again.
Yeah.
Multi-generational holidays, so grandparents going with their children and their grandchildren. So a lot of that higher end stuff. And we saw the general package holidays, the bucket and spade type stuff, took a lot longer to come back, especially after last year and some of the challenges we saw with the changing rules. It kind of took a little bit longer to come back this year, but that's really started to resurge again now as well.
And the villas make sense, I guess, because people are looking for space.
Yeah.
And James, I think you were saying that you'd noticed similar trends with regards to villas, and talk to us a little bit about the demographic that you will be serving when the app when it does go live.
Yeah. So we've compiled a feasibility report and looked at the total addressable market for our demographic, and what we're finding is there is an uptrend for the digitally empowered millennial. So the younger generation that looks for quicker, targeted ways to get to where they want to stay through content and AI-led technologies. In terms of what Julia was saying, I totally agree. I've spent, probably half of the pandemic in the Maldives, and that's given me the liberty to see the kind of traffic that the Maldives is generating. Because as it goes on to green light systems for different source markets, people are funneling that revenge demand that's there because you're in a water villa on stilts, 25 to 30 meters away from the next person. We had a case when we were in the Maldives where someone in the villa next to us had tested positive, and they confined it to that villa. And the fact that you have to leave the island to get to the next island meant that it was easily contained within the 10-day incubation period that they would have had that positive result. So we are finding that there's a much more of a trend towards the kind of naturally socially distant type holiday, again with longer lead-in times, or shorter lead-in times, and longer holidays. So we're finding that people are a lot more choosy with where they want to stay, given that it's been booked on a much less frequent basis.
But you're saying shorter lead-in times, so they're more choosy, but they're like, I want to go tomorrow.
Yeah, because they're not conscious of when regulations can shift and change. So things are done on a much shorter lead-in.
Oh, there's another plane.
Yeah.
And you said it's millennials that you're targeting, so not Gen Z, because a lot of people are now talking about Gen Z, aren't they? But it's the millennial market that you're looking
It's
at.
both. I wouldn't want to discount the baby boom market because I think that a lot of what we are selling is, again, targeted towards them.
Right.
But I think what we're trying to do is to make the content as intuitive as possible. So we're trying to show that something actually that's new can be embraced by anyone. And I think by having an app that isn't the kind of homogenized way of going through thumbnail images and swiping left and right to go through that gallery, but being able to tour through could appeal not just to millennials, but everyone. But the millennials are the first to embrace this.
Okay. I want to talk about the fickleness of consumers, because they are fickle, as we all know. And although we're seeing this resurgence in people wanting to use travel agents, and it's understandable, I gave the examples pre-COVID that we were seeing people wanting to come back to have that protection. We do know that people are fickle and that they can be tempted by price. So I'd like to ask each of you your thoughts on whether you think this is a short-lived trend, whether we will actually see people wanting to go back to sort of DIYing their own holiday if they become lured by price in the next couple of years, or do you think that this is a trend here to stay? Because this afternoon is all about what is the future of retail. So Jim, Julie, and James, I'll come to you.
I think the starting point is if you make the assumption that it is more expensive to use trusted travel advice, and that assumption could be incorrect.
Yeah.
Our franchisees are experts in travel, and they've no overheads. They've got no overheads, so and they have to only provide exactly what the customer wants. They don't do any directional selling. There's no product that they have to sell. They're not commissioned on one thing over another. Right. So providing customers with exactly what they want will always be the most important thing. Budget will follow closely after that. Okay, and they often go hand in hand. At the moment, maybe budget is sitting alongside safety and duty of care, but budget will always be there. You find often that customers gravitate to where they feel that they will get the service that they want. So I don't mean to be disparaging, because I have been one of these too, but if I'm going on my stag party, okay, and I want to go somewhere cheap and cheerful, and I don't care about the nature of the accommodation, and the boys just want to go and we're not there to see the sights, we're just there to have a laugh, then we might do that ourselves, okay?
Right.
If I want to go on honeymoon, I want to make sure it's perfect. I want to make sure everything's taken care of. If I want to go on business travel and I need to be at the meeting or need to be at my office at certain times, so it depends entirely on type of customer or client and nature of travel. Budget will always be a consideration for any traveller, in my opinion, but budget is different depending on the nature of travel. Like Julie, our business seems to be for those customers that appreciate service, and that's not always high-end travel. We sell Benidorm as much as we sell Barbados, and it's people who appreciate service and know that they're going to get a level of service that when they spend their hard-earned money, that they know they're spending it wisely. And I'll finish with what I started with. It would be a false assumption to assume that getting trusted travel advice and handheld concierge-style support is more expensive.
Yeah.
It all comes down to value for money.
Yeah, you're right. It's the perception that perhaps is out there. Julie, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I agree with everything that Jim said. I think the additional point to add to that is the time it takes people to source their own holidays.
Yeah.
We are the same. We're independent. We don't have to sell a particular product. We can sell exactly what the customer's looking for, and that's what we're there for. It's that trusted advice. What are they looking for? And find the right product for the right customer. And I think that we can then steer them based on asking them the right questions to the holiday that is right for them. Often customers will find it takes them hours. There is so much content out there for them to search through. And then, of course, they've got to look at the travel advice, and they've got to make sure that they've got the right documentation. And, with Brexit, we've seen the challenges around passports. And, there is just always something happening that can have an impact on a customer. All of that advice and guidance comes when you work with a travel agent, because that's what we're there for, that's what we do, that's what we know. And, we just can handhold them through the whole process.
Yeah. James, I saw you nodding to the points about there being so much content out
there.
Again,
I concur, but with me, it's, we're talking about luxury travel where, again, content has to take precedence with everything that we're launching.
Yeah.
But I think there is a shift. I think it was always content was for the luxury sector was the main motivator. I think location was probably secondary, and third was reviews, and fourth was price.
Okay.
So you're attracting less price-conscious people when you're talking about the kind of luxury sector. I think reviews is moving up that ladder because, as Julie was saying, I think people are more motivated by, I need a trust-piloted view on this. I need to know that where I'm staying doesn't just look fancy, but it's been validated by other people's opinion, not just before the pandemic, but during the pandemic, and how easy it was to get there. So I think there are shifting paradigms within this, but again, less so with myself and what Jim was saying. Price is not the key motivator for the kind of market that we're looking at, but I could see within kind of luxury or business travel how price would take more precedence.
And the reviews piece is interesting because, of course, people are used to the Amazon world and ordering things based on reviews, in other sectors. I can see time is almost running out. Just to check whether we do have any questions at all. Do raise your hand if you do have one. If not, I'm going to wrap up with one last question to each of you, which is bringing it back to our main session title, exploring who will be the winners in travel retail in the future. Jim, I'm going to come to you, then Julie, and then James. Who do you think is the kind of key winner in travel retail? And you can't say everyone.
Well, I was going to be magnanimous and say that there's a place for everyone, depending on the nature of the customer. But if I'm to pick the real winners, that handheld support from start to finish and beyond is so important. I can't stress enough, and complexity has thrown it into the consciousness of the wider society. But what we see is travel is imperfect by its very nature. Flights get delayed, transfers do or don't happen, hotels put you in the right room or the wrong room, you got the right view or the wrong view. There's so many component parts, whether it's an ash cloud or terrorist attacks, God forbid, or wider global pandemics. It is fraught with uncertainty and unpredictability. And that is sitting front and center in everyone's minds these days. So if you can find someone that provides trusted travel, not just advice, but expertise, maybe augmented with things that James and Julie have mentioned as well, that they can be visible and available in lots of different channels to appeal to different demographics. That's what's going to win, in my opinion. Okay.
It's like people expect almost sometimes things are going to go wrong. It's how it's dealt with when things go wrong that's the key.
And the loyalty, I don't know about any of you, but when you have a bad experience and it's dealt with really well, it almost makes that relationship stronger, right? In any environment. The relationships have never been stronger amongst travel providers and their customers or clients where they have really went above and beyond in the last 2 years. That loyalty that's engendered has been massive.
Yeah. Julie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. I think as a retail high street travel agent, you've got the ability to have that community connection as well. I mean, I think if you put your customer front and center of everything that you do and you understand what they want from you and you can articulate back to them the benefits of booking with a travel agent, then you're going to win. I mean, just a couple of the anecdotes of what we've seen over the last couple of years. We've had staff who've been out on their 1 hour a day exercise, bumping into their customers, having those conversations. How are you? What's been happening? What are you up to? And the following day, they've got a booking from that customer. They've not gone to sell to that customer. They've just happened upon them. But if you're focused on your customer and you're active in your community and you know what your benefits are and you're selling them well, then of course you're going to win.
Community piece is key. And James, it's a different world for you. But what would your thoughts be?
It's a very difficult question without being completely biased.
You can be biased, it's fine.
I'll try and be diplomatic. I think it's an amalgamation of what Julie and Jim both said. I think that if you can get it right online as well, so that your customer is frontline and center, I think that's the key point here. I think what we're trying to do is to take a bite-sized chunk out of each sides of the direct and indirect way of people booking rooms. One of the things that we want to bring in is the intimacy of knowing your customer, knowing what they want, and knowing how to hold their hand should anything go wrong in the current climate. So
they still have the connection.
Yeah, to build that connection, and that would really come from the kind of relationships that tour operators facilitate with their end clients.
Yeah, so it's that connection that seems to be the key theme in here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to all three of you. Sadly, it's all we have time for, but a huge, huge thank you to all three of you. Please give me a hand in thanking Jim, Julie, and James. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.